All right, let's jump into today's devotional topic, which is entitled Strengthen the Straight Path. And it comes from Proverbs 4:25 through 27. Let your eyes fix straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you, give careful thought to the paths on your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left, keep your foot from evil. So, what is this about? Why is this a good habit to have? Well, let's pull back and just say, I'm sure probably in your marriage, or if you're planning a marriage, neither of you are wanting or perhaps even expecting either yourself or your spouse to stray, whatever that may mean. Because I'm not just referring to out and out affairs or although that certainly is something to address. That's probably the worst one that could actually happen. But how do you address this? How do you make sure that you don't end up going there? Now, nothing is perfect. There's no way you can completely avoid it. But sometimes having a habit which strengthens the nature of what that straight path is can avoid a lot of problems in the future. So what does that mean? To me, having a conversation, again, it doesn't have to be a deep one unless it tends to go there, but knowing that you continue to have it is sort of defining in chunks, well, what is the ways that you respectively guard your hearts? What are situations where you have a common understanding of how the other person is going to behave? And having those conversations, and depending on your past and your relationship to date, they may be super easy because you're on the same page, or they may be super hard, but it's much better to have them now and get clarity early and then to repeat those. So let me start by saying what this is not. This is not a case where you're each other's accountability partner. That is probably not a good dynamic to set up in a relationship. Your accountability should be with someone else outside the marriage, generally of the same sex. I would say probably exclusively of the same sex. However, it is fair to start to say, hey, how has it been going? Have you been meeting? Again, trying to be judgment-free and supportive, but hey, how has it been going? Is this a priority? Maybe it's busy. Maybe you need help from the other person to establish that time. So make sure that there's some accountability. So what are these contexts within the conversation to sort of have? So I think the end question being asked is, well, what is the foundation each believe you're going to jointly hold to stay on a straight path? So let me give a very simple example, and then if you go through the content on the blog, we'll go into more detail. Is what is the agreement on whether it's okay to have one-on-one with friends of the opposite sex? Do you both agree? What is the nature, do you know of these people of the opposite sex? Do you need to tell the other person that you're having it? Like, shaping those things and having that conversation really ensures that people are on the same page, because it's very possible two people, even if you know each other for a long time and are married, may actually have very different definitions of what is okay. They have very different expectations. And so from this process, you can start to gain agreement. For many people, they think, oh, it's just the same, and then that's great. But with others, it's much better to have that early. Some of these are very nuanced. For example, thoughts on social media. Do you agree that, we're just not going to use Instagram and not follow people? And to just share it. Now, it doesn't have to be, hey, I expect you to do this. If you go through sort of the more details that are in the blog, and then sort of the more simplified exercises and background in the course, you may have something like, well, you disclose, I don't go on social media. I think being on Instagram is not that helpful. You might be a male and say, I really don't think it's been great for me to do it because of all these thirst traps, so I just choose not to do it. And that's not judgment. The woman may say, but I'm on Instagram all the time, but all I'm doing is looking at food photographs. There's not even a person in there. And so then you kind of level set, and it just may seem very trivial. You kind of just move on. But going through the different contexts of what is okay and what is not okay and what are the expectations. So here's another one, which is also covered in the blog, is what about travel? Is there an expectation when some person is traveling of what they should be doing, say, at the end of the evening? Is there expectation to always call or not? Maybe it's unspoken and everybody's fine and they just trust. That could be great. But maybe there's some issues where someone does want to bring those up. The last one, which I think really is why this should be a good habit, is knowing that every 40 days, you yourself, in the quiet part of the devotion, will just reflect a little bit on, do you feel a risk is opening up? Is something going on? And most of that you have to take back to your accountability group. Hey, I'm starting to have this risk. There's someone at work thinking about. I'm going to be traveling, and from my past, I know I tend to do X, Y, and Z if I travel. And then you have an accountability partner and set up a way to really handle that. However, I think this is the place also to talk about what can be done within the context of the marriage to reduce it. So, for example, kind of stepping into it, not saying, because you do this, I am going to do this. Because you do this, I'm going to stray. But it's more reflecting, hey, something is missing. And then perhaps the man can say, you know what? During this time, while reflecting on areas of risks, it did make me think about, there was a lot of criticism that happened last week. That feels like it falls in the category of risk. Or withholding physical attention. I'm feeling this, but remember not to tie together. Therefore, I'm going to do this. It's just a time, a safe space to say, how do we strengthen us? How do we strengthen the straight path? The same thing can be with a woman. She may say, I'm not getting enough attention. For me, this creates, a sense that if we're going to talk about our straight path, how do we do this? And then to work together on how can the issue be solved together. And we talk more about that in the nature of walking and talking side by side, but this is a good time to do this during the devotion. So if you have questions as you try to implement this or as you listen to this that you want me to answer, go ahead. It's in the show notes. You can click on it. You can then provide your question, and I will then answer it in a subsequent podcast. All right. Thanks for listening.